Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rofi Kusuma Dewi. My student number is 44. On this occasion, I'm going to present about one topic under the title homeschooling. But before I start, I'm going to say thank you very much for everyone who has joined my presentation. And what I want to discuss on this presentation include first is introduction, and then I will continue with the advantage of homeschooling, and then the disadvantage of homeschooling, and the last I will close this presentation with conclusion. So without wasting any time, let's get started. I think everyone agrees that education is very important, and the best education always comes from the family first, right? But if you talk about the academic education, I think not all family can totally fulfill this type of education for their children. So the only way that parents can do is by sending their children to school. And as we know, the development of education doesn't only occur for formal education but also for non-formal ones. For example, is like the implementation of homeschooling system that include to the non-formal education. So what is actually homeschooling? Okay, homeschooling is an alternative educational method that parents choose to educate their children at home rather than in public or private schools. So if we look at a glance, physically, the difference between homeschooling and the regular school lies in the place where the learning takes place. And this type of education also allows parents to determine the right teaching system according to their children's abilities, interests, and also their learning styles. So I think this is pretty or maybe very flexible for the children itself. In addition, parents will also bring home teaching staff so that they can teach their children properly, like in the formal curriculum. In Indonesia itself, homeschooling has become a legal educational system based on regulation of Kemendikbud number 129 of 2014. So parents who want to homeschool their children, they are required to make a report to the educational office at the district or at the city. But why parents choose to homeschool their children? Why they do not send them to the regular school? Okay, so I think there are many reasons that makes families choose to homeschool their children at home. The first is maybe the children have certain medical conditions that prevent them to attend the formal schools, and then it can be caused by the dissatisfaction with the educational method that exists. The third, it can be caused from the different religious of educational philosophies with the educational system that exists in that area, for example. And the last, it may be caused by the belief that the children are not progressing within the traditional school structures. So yeah, these problems may happen everywhere, right? Okay, now let's move to the next slide. Yeah, even though the existence of homeschooling is equivalent to the formal education system, but of course, homeschooling has its own benefits that differ with the regular school. So what are they? Okay, the first is children can get the full attention. The most important advantage of the learning method with the homeschooling system is that they can get the full attention from the teaching staff or educators, because they don't have to wait for their turn to learn something new. So I personally think that it can make the learning more efficient, more effective, and also the learning can be more creative for the children itself. Besides that, parents can also directly supervise their children's learning process and interactions. Second, homeschooling is more flexible. Here, parents, children, and also teaching staff can discuss the time to start learning and determine the length of time to study. In addition, children can also choose what subjects that they want to learn in one day, and here parents can also help them to decide what subjects it would be. The third, it can develop skills. Okay, so I believe that everybody was born different from one to another, and I guess you all agree about it, right? Yeah, so it indicates that every child has different talents and interests, as well as the ability to process information. And with homeschooling, the appropriate learning approaches and methods can optimize children's skills according to their interests, abilities, and also their learning styles. And the last is it prevents mental health issues. So we can think that sometimes mental health issue may be connected to the negative school situation, and the advantage of homeschooling is getting a child out of that bad situation itself. So it means that it can keep the children away, for example, or from bully, maybe from school-induced stresses, or maybe from self-refusal towards school environments, that those factors can lower their learning motivation. So by homeschooling, it means that they create a safe and better situation for learning. Okay, so that's all about the advantage of homeschooling. Now let's jump to the next slide. Yeah, regardless of the benefits offered by homeschooling, there are also several disadvantages of this educational system. Number one is homeschooling is very expensive. Okay, of course. If we compare between homeschooling and public schools where education is free, homeschooling can be very costly, because it means that we have to equip ourselves with the newest curriculum as well as the teaching and learning tools, that the price can be very expensive. So for parents who choose to homeschool their children, they should be more prepared to spend more money than the parents who send their children to the public schools. And the second is it lacks of socialization. Okay, homeschooling makes children's social life limited to the interactions with teaching staff and their parents only, compared to the children who are attending the formal schools, So therefore, to overcome this social effect, parents need to keep their children to stay connected with their school world and also their peers. For example, is by creating a group of homeschooling children so that they can gather, learn together, and also interact with one another. And the third, or the last, it also lacks of facilities. Yeah, I think we all agree that it's quite impossible if a home can be as well equipped of facilities as in the regular school, right? Yeah, especially when it comes to the subjects that require experiments. So yeah, like like biology, chemistry, and also physics. We can imagine how hard it would be to get all those necessary chemicals, materials, and also apparatus and so on. So they need to prepare and pay themselves for those needs, because if they don't do it, they will not have the same or even better learning experiences as the regular students get at school, at the regular school I mean. So yeah, that's all of it. And now I'm coming to the end of my presentation. In summary, I spoke about homeschooling, which focused on its advantage and disadvantage. And apart from those things, no matter what education system we choose for our children, let's always think that education is important. That's the main point. And as parents, we need to be ready of all things that may happen related to the education of our children. And I think it's better to consider some things first before we choose which one the educational system that suits for our children. Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.